Okay, and everybody who registered will receive the recording afterwards. So, and everybody who's here obviously will as well. So please don't feel like you have to scribble down a bunch of notes. We will provide you with the recording. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm a big fan of starting promptly. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. Today we're going to talk data-driven storytelling. And I first would just want to go ahead and kick it off by introducing our two guests. Again, I don't want to waste any time because this content is so good that I'm just going to hop right in. So first, I would like to introduce Sheri Chaney Jones. Sheri is the founder and CEO of SureImpact. And for more than 20 years, Sheri has worked alongside foundations, nonprofits, and government leaders to help them use data to solve complex social problems and increase revenue. She is an author, professor, and she's internationally recognized as a measurement expert. Wow, international, love that. And Sheri believes in data, metrics, and accountability. So welcome, Sheri. Thank you for coming and joining us today.
Thank you, Carly. Great to be here.
Yeah, and then also I'd love to introduce my next guest, which is Chris Miano. He is the founder and CEO of MemoryFox. He spent 8 years in the Army where he traveled the world and he learned about the power of storytelling and how it is a tool that connects people across cultures, generations, and socioeconomic backgrounds. And since then, Chris has made it his mission to elevate the stories of real human beings. And really taking it one step further, he really believes that through authentic storytelling, the world can become a more inclusive and equitable place for everybody. So thank you for joining us today, Chris.
Thank you for having me, Carly.
And quickly, I just want to share with you all kind of how today's going to work. We are going to break down today's session into 3 parts. So first, Sheri is going to guide us through the process of collecting, analyzing, and presenting data effectively. Then second, Chris is going to explore the power of storytelling. That's going to kind of include, how to collect great stories and how those stories can benefit every department at your nonprofit. And then third, you all were wonderful and submitted great questions during registration. So Chris and Sheri, I have a ton of questions for you from all of our guests, and I'm going to do my best to get as many answered as possible. So be ready. I'm going to be hitting you with the hard questions. But like I said, we're going to kick it off with Sheri. So Sheri, take it away.
Thank you so much, Carly. Let me get my slide here real quick, and we're going to get started because I know I read some of those questions. You guys are ready to learn, ready to go and learn about both qualitative and quantitative storytelling. And if you had followed Chris in our conversations on social media before this presentation, we were having a healthy debate about what's better, stories or data. Well, guess what? You need both. And I like to say 1 + 1 = 3. When you add data with stories related to impact, that's when the real magic happens in terms of your ability to raise more money and create and scale your impact. So we definitely need data and with our stories to create more powerful stories. So when we talk about impact measurement, I recognize that it is not nonprofit professionals' favorite thing to talk about. Most people got into the line of work that they did because they want to make a difference. They didn't want to become statisticians or math majors, and that's cool. So let's talk about why we want to prioritize impact measurement and impact data. The research is clear, overwhelmingly clear, that when nonprofits share their impact data along with their storytelling, they are significantly more likely to increase funding. They are ensuring that they're creating outcomes for the lives that they serve because they'll know if they're on track or off track and what they need to do to improve. And it also allows you to provide a much more powerful story. And we'll talk about that in the end. So this is why we do this. Data is just a means to an end, and it's about moving your mission forward. So this is my personal quote. I love this quote. It's guided my whole entire life. In God we trust, everyone else must bring data. And your funders feel that way too. So when you're pitching your nonprofit to a foundation, a government entity, even now we're seeing the next generation of donors are looking for that impact data. They want to move towards trust-based philanthropy. They want to be able to, invest in causes that are making a difference. They see you as a portal of purpose, but they can't see the impact you're having. You also can't manage and see the impact you're having unless you're measuring to those outcomes. So that's why this is so important for us in this topic today. So we're going to go back to a little bit of the basics 101 when we talk about what is impact data. What data do you need in order to tell a powerful story, both with quantitative and qualitative data? The first is impact data is proving that you're achieving lasting social change. Whatever that mission is on your mission statement, it's having evidence that shows to your donors, to your funders, to your staff, to your stakeholders, that you actually are moving the needle on the outcomes that you say your nonprofit is here to achieve. Therefore, we need to create evidence. That's what I look when I talk about impact measurement. It's evidence, it's demonstrated impact. And therefore, we need data. Yes, we can have stories. Stories are a great way to talk about how you are moving a particular situation or person, humanizes it, but data also shows in a systematic way how we're making the difference. All right, so here's a perfect example of a data-driven story. So we have two options. Let's say you're a funder and you receive these two applications. The first is an outputs only statement. It talks about just the number of people served within your nonprofit for the year. The second is a nonprofit that has outcomes and impact data when they're telling their story. So they're talking about how many people they served, how they moved reading comprehension, what percentage of the students that they served stayed in school and out of the juvenile justice system and are able to even then communicate their social return on investment. How much, for every $500 donated, they were able to increase the lifetime earning potential of one child by $289,000. So that is a quantitative impact statement. And we want you to move to think about your own nonprofit. Where are you in that journey? The ones that can do the outcomes based impact statements are the ones that attract those funds over the nonprofits that just focus on number of outcomes. So when we talk about quantifying your impact, this is the type of statement that we would want to help you move towards, that are most powerful. Another evidence of the importance of having impact data is related to the research I did back in 2014. I wrote all about it in my book, Impact and Excellence. And what we found was that there are three types of nonprofits. There are those who have impact and outcomes data, and they're using it to drive decisions. There's those that live more in the outputs world that can just talk about counts of people served or number of services provided. And then there are those who have no data related to their programming. And across the board, you can see that the organizations are purple organizations. Those who have outcome and impact data are significantly more likely to achieve the things that all of you desire to achieve. So if you looked at increased revenue, for example, 62% of our nonprofits that had impact and outcomes data reported increased revenues versus just 18 with those with only outputs. And those without any data at all, only 12% reported increased revenues. So having these types of information is the hidden secret sauce. And what I love to share about this slide is let's look at external relationships. A lot of people point this out to me. And this is where Memory Fox and the qualitative work comes in. So you'll see that 81% of those with impact and outcomes data were able to have better external relationships. That includes relationships with funders. But then we'll look at the 42% of those with outputs only data and 50% with no data. And although those two, the 42 and 50%, are not significantly different, when we dug deeper to understand why the trends weren't the same, is we found that those who didn't have data were relying more on stories and relationships. And so when you add, though, then the impact and qualitative data on top of that, that's when you start to see a huge difference from 81% having improved external relationships to just 50% who were more relying on stories and relationships. So how are we going to get there? I'm sure you're sitting here thinking, this is great, Sheri. I would love to have an impact and outcomes story, but what should I be doing? How do I get there? How do I figure out what I should be collecting? And here is a very simple exercise. You will get these slides, so make sure you do this exercise at your convenience after this webinar. But it is the 5 whys exercise. You'll ask yourself 3 questions 5 times. The first is, why does your nonprofit do what it does? Right? So if you're a youth development organization, you'll be asking yourself, why do you do what you do? What is your mission? Maybe it's to give children a safe place to learn, to increase their social emotional learning, to help them have better grades, get a better job, live a better quality of life, stay out of trouble, whatever it is. But you're going to ask yourself, why do you do what you do? The second question you're going to ask yourself is, why do your funders and partners want to partner with you? Because they may have some different motivations. They may have your same whys, but they might be looking to reduce juvenile justice fees or criminal fees, or maybe they're looking for, if it's a school system, they're making sure that children are in the classroom, so they increase their revenues from the state. So they may have slightly different whys than your whys. And the third is to ask yourself, why do your participants or clients participate in your program? What do they hope to accomplish? And these, especially if you're thinking about serving youth, they might want a fun environment to be in. They may want to hang with their friends. Your parents might be signing them up. Maybe the parents have a specific skill. They want their kids to go to a better college, or they don't want them to be home alone. Whatever it is, those whys might be different from your funders' whys, and it might be different from your whys. And when we think about communicating to our audience and proving our impact to our stakeholders, we need to understand each one of those. And those whys are going to become our outcomes. That's what we're going to measure. So once you've done the 5 whys exercise, excuse me, you're going to put this into a logic model. And the reason we use a logic model as a tool to measure our success is because it will demonstrate the logical linkages between what you do, or who you're serving, and what are those short, medium, and long-term outcomes. And we can measure everything. We're not going to measure everything, but at least that gives us a framework, a basis of what we should be measuring when we talk about measuring our impact and outcomes. So let's get really clear about what is the difference between an output and an outcome. And so if I were to give you this example, and I want you to open your chats because this is an interactive question. So McDonald's sells 33 million hamburgers a day. Five Guys sells 350,000 hamburgers a day. And I want you to answer the following question. Who makes the better hamburger? All right, go open up your chat. Tell me who makes the better hamburger. Five Guys or McDonald's? Okay, we got one Five Guys. Oh, we got a McDonald's. Okay. They don't know. Carly doesn't know. Oh, okay. We got this is a mixed audience. All right. There are the Five Guys are trickling in. Five Guys, Five Guys, Five Guys. All right. So this is often the case, right? I ask this question, I get the answer Five Guys, but Five Guys sells more hamburgers a day, or McDonald's sells more hamburgers a day than Five Guys. Why I share this example is because think about the nonprofit sector. What do we typically do? We count hamburgers. We count outputs. The number of hamburgers the different hamburger joints serve, that is just an output. So that would be like you talking about the number of kids served, people served, adults served, number of services provided. But when I asked you who made the better hamburger, you made your decision, or most of us, you made your decision based on quality, not quantity. And so we want to make sure we have evidence of our quality, your true profit are outcomes. And so that's why the 5 whys exercise is so important, because it gets to what are those outcomes? Why does your organization exist? What is it trying to accomplish? And then you measure that in order to communicate your impact. All right, so how are we going to get there? You're like, okay, I want to tell an outcome and impact story. I know it's going to help me raise more money. I've done the 5 whys exercise. I've developed a logic model. Now what do I need to do? Well, you have to prioritize data collection. The only way you'll be able to have data to tell an impact story is if you incorporate the data collection within your day-to-day ongoing way of doing your work. And you'll need 3 types of data. You need the demographics, the number of people that you serve and who they are, something about different race, gender, ethnicity, zip codes, whatever is unique to your logic model, your theory of change. You also need to be able to talk about what did you do with them, and then have those whys, those outcomes. How are people off? So you need these 3 types of data in order to tell a compelling impact measurement story. So we talked a little bit about that. You also want to capture the cost and revenue, so you can calculate your cost per success, and something related to quality, related to participant and stakeholder feedback and the satisfaction. This is a great way to think about how to organize how you're going to tell your story when you're collecting your data. It's thinking about 3 types of questions and creating a measurement or framework around that. What was done? Again, those are going to be your demographics, number of served, how well it's done. That will be data related to quality, timeliness, cultural responsiveness, client experience, and then how people are better off. Those will be a count or a percentage or a systematic data collection related to your outcomes and your impact. So once you've done the 5 whys exercise, created your logic model, prioritize data collection, you'll likely want to put this measurement framework together so that you'll know when you go to tell an impact story that you can communicate what was done, how well was it done, and how people and communities are better off because of your work. So in order to get to a statement of impact, our recommended approach is to have 3 pieces of data. The first is a clearly defined outcome, the number of people who successfully achieve those outcomes, and then how much your program costs. Because this will then allow you to capture that cost per success. How much does it cost to get one person to a successful outcome? This is so much different than cost per service. Because if we just talk about cost per service, the only thing we can do to increase efficiency is to do more with less. So we want to be able to communicate how much does it cost to get to an outcome, because that's what our funders are really buying. So when you go fundraise, you can say it costs $2,000 to get one client to income stability, or whatever it is the outcome is you're measuring. So we talked a lot about that, the 3 types of things. And here's an example of a nonprofit who is able to be very successful systematically gathering their data. Pathlight Home is a housing provider in Orlando, Florida, and they adopted SureImpact to help them measure what they did, how well they did it, and how people are better off. And because they had the relationship between what they did and how well they did it and who was better off, they learned that their residents who received case management services were 2.5 times more likely to have a successful or no-fault move-out compared to those who did not have case management services. They then took this information and this data, went and fundraised, got some funds from the Disney Foundation and others to help them make sure that all of their residents had access to case management services, which allowed them then to increase their outcomes, which was a successful no-fault move-out because they're a housing provider. They also were able to look at a variety of different outcomes that told the multiple complex of the stories. So they knew the journey using their 5 whys of how their programs were improving, not just the earnings and the housing stability of the families that they served or the individuals they served. They also were able to understand by program, what were the eviction rates? Were they getting people access to mental health care? Were their family relationships improved? Did they have increased job skills? And they're using this data to drive levers to improve their programs, to improve their outcomes, as well as raise more money. So you want to be able to tell a complex story related to your outcomes so that you know how you're changing lives and changing circumstances within your communities. So that was a high-level overview. I want Chris to have plenty of time to talk about the qualitative side of things, but those are the nuts and bolts and steps you'll want to adopt to create an impact data organization.
All righty. Can everybody see my, oops, we're like a little bit ahead there. Can everyone see my screen here? All right, good. I just heard a little baby waking up upstairs way earlier than they were supposed to get up from their nap. So if you hear some screaming, there's nothing going on. It's just a baby upstairs. All right. Well, thank you, Sharon. I thought it was really good. And I liked your idea of the 5 whys. I think that actually applies to startups too. I think it had my brain turning too a lot in terms of how we can measure things. So thank you for sharing that. And I think of qualitative and quantitative sort of like, yin and yang, peanut butter and jelly, right? Like they're both good, but they are even better together. And so we'll talk a little bit about how to marry those two things. How to actually show your mission with qualitative storytelling content. Everyone kind of knows they need to do it, but it's like, how do we actually do it? So let's dive into it. All right. So I'm sort of a stats nerd myself. So we put together some statistics to show why quantitative or qualitative measurement is so important. So first off, and probably most importantly, it'll allow you to raise more funds. Classy actually did a study and they found that campaigns that incorporate video, qualitative impact video, receive 114% more funding than campaigns that don't. And I think that totally makes sense, right? Video gives you a window into the people and the mission, like nothing else. Oops, sorry. Second off, it's more memorable. Viewers retain vastly more information when they see it through video. People telling stories to other people is a primal human function. I mean, how do you think the very first impact measurement ever took place, right? They told stories about it. No one could read back then or anything, right? They told stories about it. And that's how impact measurement had happened for thousands of years. And finally, it's what people want. It's what they crave these days. Short form video like Instagram, TikTok, and the like have exploded as attention spans and the attention economy have grown. And so, you want to be telling stories about your impact that meet the tastes of the times. And video is the way people are telling those stories. And in a lot of ways, nonprofits have been given an impossible task to stand out in this attention economy against organizations that have a lot more money than them. And so we'll talk about that, how you can leverage authentic grassroots video impact content to kind of level the playing field a little bit. And here's an example I love to share. This is Kids Health Connections out of Michigan, and they use community-generated impact content to be able to supplement their grant application, to supplement the quantitative material that they were uploading. So let's give it a look.
I love the mentors, and I love that they help me and they motivate me and push me up when I'm feeling down and I stop or I'm say I can't do it. They always say I can't, but I always say I can, but they always say I can do it. Never say you can't. So I love that they motivate me all the time. And we're strong, fit kids.
All right, right. I mean, that's beautiful, authentic, grassroots impact content. And imagine that right next to a beautiful statistic about how many people and what was the impact and how it changed their lives, right? Those two things married together tell a very powerful story that touches all aspects of what motivates a person or a granting organization. And so we know video is important, right? And we know that what good impact video looks like. So how do we actually get started collecting it? Because that tends to be the actual problem. So we built a simple framework at MemoryFox that anybody can use. And when I say simple, it is very intentionally simple because video doesn't have to be hard and is very accessible to everybody. So if you stick sort of this tried and true strategy, you'll always end up with great impact content that you can share alongside your statistics and your more quantitative data. All right, so before you even go talk to somebody, start at the end result. What are we trying to accomplish here? Is it for a social media campaign, a donor report, grant, a gala? Is it qualitative video about a very specific quantitative statistic that you want to share? Possibly for a report or something otherwise. And then think about what type of content would be best for it. A slideshow, a single video, a snippet that you want to put up on Instagram stories. But first step is just think about those outputs and then work your way backwards from that to be able to fill in the information beforehand. So as you think about who to collect it from, step 2, what type of content will satisfy the requirements for step 1? Do we want testimonials? Do we want maybe video of the mission in action? Do we want children talking about the mission, kind of like we showed earlier? Do we want videos from actual mission beneficiaries? Do we want it from volunteers? Maybe we want it from staff or even donors who feel passionately about the mission. All of this tells the story of your organization in a qualitative way. So think about the inputs next after thinking about those outputs. And then finally, now that you know what you want to accomplish, what are the questions that we want to ask that will elicit these great responses? Great questions lead to great answers, and poor questions, they're just going to cause your storytellers to lock up. And it is a barrier to elevating their voice. And that's what we're here to do, is elevate people's voices to share the qualitative story of the organization. And so, like I said, to wrap it up, what do you want to accomplish? What type of content will help you achieve that? And what are the call to actions that will help you get that content? And this is exactly what Kids Health Connections followed to submit for their grant. And like I said, great stories equals great results. And they were actually able to successfully win this grant by marrying the qualitative and the quantitative side of their submission, which I think is really, really powerful to see. Now, we put this in here. Thank you so much. If you like, you can kind of go ahead and scan this QR code if you want, and you'll get we'll be able to email you some information. We'll include these slides, some additional information, and an actual walkthrough of how Fit Kids did their campaign and why it was successful. So I'll give you guys a minute if you want to run through that. Or I think, Carly, I think we're going to share it with them after the presentation. So, but I'll give everybody, 15 seconds to kind of run through that. And then we'll launch into the next part. All right, cool. And like I said, we'll be sending this out to everybody who attended as well. All right, so I wanted to include in this because there were some questions that actually were submitted that actually apply to my side of the presentation. And so one thing that we saw a lot of was I'd like to see examples of how organizations collect actual stories and share them in various mediums. And so what I prepared was 4 examples across 4 different mediums. Now, fundraising, we already touched. That's a pretty obvious use case for your stories. But we'll go through donor stewardship, programs, marketing, and volunteer recruitment and engagement. And so in terms of donor stewardship, I love this one. This is always a very powerful way to hit people with almost like a wall of qualitative content, showing them a story page, right? List out all, take all the stories that you collected, put them all on one page. This was a beautiful presentation put together by Martin St. Lucie using Canva, which is obviously an amazing tool that you guys can use for qualitative presentation of your information. And look at this, right? I mean, if you're a donor and you see this every month, I mean, that is the type of qualitative information that you just love to see. And it's fairly easy to present using things like Canva and other tools. So I really like this one. It's a really great way to hit them with a wall of qualitative. Another one is Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle collected questions from students and about COVID, and then they took all those and then they put it into a bigger sort of impact content on YouTube, which I thought was a really cool way to institute sort of like multi-channel. And yeah, this was a great way to kind of tell the story. You tell a little bit, showing your impact a little bit through YouTube and through presentation of programs and things like that. Everything you do conveys your mission and your values and things like that. That's all part of your qualitative story. Next one, and this is obviously very cool. You've got Camp Awakaya. I keep forgetting the name of them. It sounds like Camp Anawana for those of a certain age. Yeah, they used it. They use it for their marketing materials. They actually put these videos right on their website, right? People come to your website. They want to learn. Certainly, you're going to present them with statistics and the quantitative side. You definitely want to have that on your website, but also supplementing it with some videos that show the qualitative aspect. People having fun, people enjoying the mission, people benefiting, and the impact that ensues. And then finally, on this one, as veteran, is very near and dear to my heart. Volunteer recruitment and engagement. So Wreaths Across America, beautiful organization. They collect, so every year, so they place wreaths at all the cemeteries throughout the country. If you ever notice, there's wreaths on the veterans' gravestones at various times a year, and that's their responsibility. And they coordinate with local organizations throughout the country. And what they did is that, as while they were doing the wreath placements at Christmas, they also had them submit content, videos, and pictures of the ceremonies. And they collected over 6,000 pieces of content from all over the country. And this is like, boom, like that is the qualitative impact. Like you are out there putting people smiling, veterans out there, and now they can use this content throughout the entire year on social media, showing their qualitative impact. They have one collection event, and then it lasts them the entire year through all the grants that they do and all the different types of events. And so it's a really powerful way to show your story, just using it on social media. But that qualitative content is really what helps drive that alongside the statistics. Another question that we got: could you share some examples of successful ways to ask people to submit their stories? One of the things that I've learned on this journey is that everybody wants to collect stories. Everybody knows that storytelling is important, but there's like a practical piece of how you actually like get the stories from people, which is not trivial. And so hopefully we have some tactics and techniques that will help you with that. One of, I think, is a very powerful one is generate a domino effect. So instead of setting up a photo booth at your events or any sort of thing like that, like set up a story booth. And once people see other people, you know, gathering around there, telling their story, it starts to spread, especially if it's a nice experience. And you start building a little bit of a domino effect, momentum to it. And especially if there's wine at your events, it's like a gala. I mean, people become very liberal with the stories that they tell and very giving of talking about the qualitative side of the mission as people open up a little bit more. And then next one, designate a content collection champ. This is a super, super important piece to this. Whenever you have your programs, and this goes to what Sheri was saying about making measurement a part of your organization. So when you have a program coming up or you have an event coming up and everybody's getting their sort of tasks assigned, one of the tasks should be, who is going to be the content collection champion? And so they might be the quantitative person as well, or something like that. Like that person is in charge of gathering the information about this event. And so they'll do the quantitative piece, but maybe the qualitative piece too, pulling people in and saying, hey, we'd love to get your story, or would it be okay if we got a little story from your child or from you, and things like that. But like having someone who's wearing that hat, that they're the ones going out there and making sure that this happens. Otherwise, if you're just setting up QR codes or you're just hoping that it'll happen, it never happens. That's just sort of the way events go. Everybody's very busy. Next one, right? To the point about asking great questions to get great stories. Part of your job as a person, and this goes to the quantitative side too, is like the questions are just as important as the answers. The questions are what get you there. And if you have good razor sharp questions, you can really get there to where you need to be. So instead of someone tell your story, how did our organization help you overcome a challenge you were facing, right? Impact. And that's a beautiful story that you attach to that statistic. And now they can see the full picture of it. Another one, instead of tell us about the volunteer work you do, tell us about the first time you volunteered. How did that make you feel? Right? How did that make you feel? And that is something that people love to talk about if they're given the space and given the actual questions that elucidate those answers. So you want to be very, very careful to craft the questions so that you can get the great qualitative content that you want to be able to complete the circle. And so finally, maybe the most important thing, and I am not very good at these types of presentations. I get very nervous about them. And so Carly's the type of person who says, you just don't be afraid, right? Just go out and do it. And then she learned that when she was working in nonprofits. And one day there was a Medal of Honor recipient that she wanted to invite to not only be a donor, but be a part of their community. And she was nervous about it. And she just, don't be afraid to ask, right? You have something great and you have something that you're proud of and something you want people want to participate. And so don't be afraid to ask. And so Carly, I thank you for that tidbit, because that just, it's a good motivational tool, I think, for everybody. But yeah, don't be afraid to ask people to hear their story, because people do want to share their story. It's like as foundational as anything else to the human experience. So really, don't be afraid of that. And so, yeah, that's my part of the presentation. I think, Carly, I think this is a great time. We'll head into those great questions and answers that
Yeah,
we're
I
pulling
have to say,
together.
I'm very honored that my picture gets to be a part of your presentation. And
You're
Sheri, I'll
you're
send you
my
some
North
pictures.
Star, Carly.
Sheri, I have pictures that I'll send to you as well, because I know
Okay.
you're wondering. Yes, you would probably like to add me as well. So I figured that would come up. Okay, wow. Well, okay, we learned a lot. I just learned so much. I mean, I work with Chris every day, so I know kind of the stuff he was saying. But Sheri, mind-blowing stuff. I've never heard of the 5 W's written in
5
that way
whys.
before.
I'm into
So
it.
I'm really loving it. Yeah, like we mentioned at the top of the hour, we have so many great question submissions that came in while people registered. So I'm just going to dive in. Let's see how many we get to. So my first question for you came from Melissa, and this is a question for both of you. So maybe I'll just start with Sheri, but this is kind of just an overview. What is data-driven storytelling, and what does it mean to you?
Yeah, so data-driven storytelling, what it means to me is related to when you identify those 5 whys, having the metrics to tell the story. So our formula is basically, what did you do? Who'd you do it for? How well did you do it? And how people are better off. So being able to answer those questions using data. And then, if you had a great video testimony where someone was telling their story of basically how they received that service and how they're now better off, kind of it solidifies, it brings the emotion and care to that data-driven story. That's my definition anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chris, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, like I think of it in terms of logos, ethos, and pathos, where it's like the logos, right? You're trying to appeal to their reasoning. And that's the part of you that craves statistics. And what I think is important about it is you have a common measurement framework across the organizations. You're using statistics. And so everyone agrees generally that statistics are they match across organizations. So you're using that to appeal to donors on a logical level. And then on the ethos side, we're demonstrating our values by elevating voices, right? And we value both statistics and the human element. We are an organization who cares about both. And I think imagine you're a community foundation or a family foundation and you're looking through organizations, that is very appealing to them, right? Because they want to know that you can do both. You're thinking about both things at that advanced level. And then finally, the pathos, right? Which is more the appeal to emotions and sympathy. That's where you want them to feel something. And so while statistics sort of stabilizes the message and makes it rigorous, the qualitative aspects activate the emotional parts of the brain that inspire action. And so I think that's why data-driven storytelling is such a great concept and a way to frame, what you do.
Oh yeah, I love it broken down that way. That's so interesting. And actually that transitions really nicely into my next question. And this was submitted by Glenelyn. So thank you, Glenelyn, for submitting this. But you both talked about this a little bit, but the question is, how do I use storytelling to describe my data impact? So how exactly do we pull those together? And I think you both touched on it, but any other tips for our audience?
Well, I think for us, we see the most powerful storytelling is when there's a story or a testimonial or video, and then you back that up with statistics. So to Chris's point, most givers, most donors, most grant funders, they're going to originally make the decision to purchase or engage with your organization because of the emotion, but they're going to rationalize their decision with their brain. So when you've got the emotional story with the data to support it, how your organization does it overall, now it's just kind of a no-brainer investment because you've got elements of both.
Yeah, and if you're not using both, you can kind of create some like unethical situations. I think you know what I mean by too overweight, because if you're just using only too much statistics, right? We're in a messy business, not a business, but like in a messy line of work, right? It's not always as clear cut as people may want it to be. And so sometimes the data may be a little uneven, right? Or maybe not as optimistic as you think that it is, or it should be. And so, but if you're all stories, well, then you're missing the big picture, and you could you know, as the saying goes, the death of one person is a tragedy and the death of a million is a statistic. And so you want to like have both sides of that to make sure that you're being ethical about the way that you tell the story about your organization and you're being truthful about your impact.
That's a really good point. It kind of reminds me of this idea of like, okay, so if you work like the nonprofit you work for, you probably have a great idea of the impact you're making, and you see those numbers and you're like, wow, look at this, how big this impact is. But sometimes I feel like you might need that context through a personal story to like not prove it, but kind of let somebody in on it with you, right? So they can really understand
humanize
it.
Yeah, it's a humanization. It's making them like, oh yeah, okay, I get that. I know a neighbor like that. I know a friend like that, you know. That reminds me of my grandma.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, my next question is for Sheri, and this is from Alexandra. And the question is, how do you present data in a visual, clear, and impactful way?
That's a great question. So I think when I always say, I do feel like I sound like a broken record because I am so in love with what did you do, how well did you do it, and how people are better off. So if you kind of build your impact measurement statement in that way, where you're able to say, hey, we served this many people, we gave them, this is what their breakdown was, this is what we did for them, and these are the results they got. Like, it's very clear. And if I'm your fundraiser and I'm telling that story, if I'm writing a grant application, it's something I can very clearly, tell the story that way. So that's from a data-driven perspective. I think just getting really clear on those key metrics is really important. And I'm sure Chris has some great ways to how to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because it kind of applies to startups too, is this idea of being very clear about your impact. And like no venture capitalist or big, guy wants to hear you meander around what you do. They want to say, Memory Fox helped nonprofits collect over 60,000 stories in 2022. You know what I mean? Like, that's an impact. And they're like, and it helped them raise X amount of dollars is like the next level, right? And so, it's all about how you present it and being clear. Yeah, and I think that's what's great about what you do, Sheri.
Okay, well, Chris, I'm going to stick with you for the next question. This was submitted by Libby, but I know personally we get this question all the time, so I'm glad that somebody asked. But the question is, how can nonprofits utilize client testimonials without exploiting people?
Oof. Yeah, I mean, this is something that I'm very passionate about because I'm sort of a cynic about social media and how it's just like this behemoth, right, that just churns out content. And I think this is actually the most important topic in qualitative nonprofit impact measurement. Is like there's this insatiable demand for video. And so nonprofits sort of have to toe the line between getting their message out there and tugging on heartstrings, but not being exploitative. And that's a little bit about the ethics that we talked about earlier. So we actually are always learning about this, and we're trying to stay ahead of the game on it because it is so important. So I don't have an easy answer, except that we have a special event panel coming up where we're going to talk about this a little more in depth. Carly, I'm sure you could drop the link because there are some thought leaders out there who have spent a lot of time researching this. And I think it's even better for them to talk about it. But I will say, for me, from an emotional perspective, it's about North Stars, right? Coming from a place of love and elevation and like elevating people's stories, not just getting a story, right? So that you have the right content for the right donor and things like that. Do not do not be a tourist in other people's misfortune. I think that's a mantra that I tell myself all the time is like, do not be a tourist in other people's misfortune. Like, they are just equal to you. And so ask them good questions that value their time and their emotions and their whatever difficulty they may be enduring, and just be thoughtful of that. And I think as long as you keep that as a North Star, you can go wrong, but you mostly won't go wrong. And I think, as we continue to build the thought leadership around this, I think a lot more will become clear over time, but it's definitely something in progress as social media is just like rapidly changing and, becoming pretty chaotic.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And yeah, I think there is, like you said, no easy answer. I think we're all trying to learn that in real time. And I guess I would just say if it feels wrong, it
There,
probably,
that's a great.
if it doesn't feel right to you,
That's a
then
life
it's probably,
lesson, I think,
it
but
might
yes.
not feel right to your audience. And like I said, we're all learning. So yeah, getting that training from like experts that are studying this stuff is
Yeah,
really,
yeah,
really
excellent.
important.
Yeah.
Okay, now I have a question from Julia, and it is for Sheri. The question is, do you have any recommendations on public or free resources that you can use for data mining?
Yeah, I think if you want to, there's two ways to tell your story. I prefer that a nonprofit collects their own data about their own impact, but sometimes you might be a little bit upstream and you want to go and talk about the community need. And that's where you can lean on the census. The US Census data makes tons of data available for free, where you can dive deep into your own community and understand what are the trends and the problems and the needs that your organization is doing. Now, I think that that's a great way to justify your case for support or to explain the need of why your nonprofit exists and what you're doing to address it. I think, though, then there's the other way where you need to source your own data. And you need to collect information from the actual participants in your survey. And you can use, survey tools or, other online resources to help you collect that information. But it's really important that nonprofits source their own data so they know that they are solving the problems that the communities are facing.
That's such a good point. I forget that the census does all of that so often. So that's a really good resource. Thank you for mentioning that. Okay, another question for Chris. How do you ensure transparency in qualitative storytelling? This came to us from Trisha.
Yeah, I think a lot about this, but I have a terrible job articulating it, but I probably do a better job in like a bar stool or something like that, sit next to somebody, because I think it's a really like rich topic, is the idea of like how to do this in an ethical and transparent way when it comes to qualitative storytelling. And so I think it's incumbent on the person, the organization that is collecting, to make sure that they're asking very good questions that keep the storyteller on track. I think, sometimes we're all legends in our own minds, or sometimes our stories can meander, our stories can get a little too much. And so it's incumbent on the person who is collecting the stories to make sure that that is done in an ethical way, and really and also making consent a big part of your collection experience. With the qualitative side, it's just consent is everything, and you're consenting to use human experiences, and you need to be thoughtful of that. And so being transparent about the way that you collect those stories. But I think the overarching thing is a commitment to authenticity, and it's about consistency of authenticity. You don't just prove that you're transparent in one moment. It's a series of moments over the course of time where you demonstrate it consistently through good quantitative and qualitative analysis of what you do. And so on the qualitative side, don't be afraid. Like if there's ums and there's ahs and there's all these types of things, that's okay, right? That separates you. On the for-profit side, they've spent millions, billions of dollars trying to replicate nonprofit storytelling. And like a lot of big brands have become very good at it. And they've made your lives a lot harder because a lot of people feel the need to like match, Kim Kardashian or Pepsi or all these types of things. It's impossible, right? So focus on the authenticity piece of what you do, and don't be afraid of ums and ahs and weirdness and things like that, because that's who you're dealing with. That's the reality. And so if you commit to authenticity, that demonstrates transparency, like by definition. And so I think you'll always make sure that you're on the right track if you commit to that.
I love that.
It's a rant a little bit. I can go deep.
No, that's fine. I can hear you rant about that any day, and I do every day. No, just okay. We have time for one more question, and this one is for Sheri. And I know you touched on this, but maybe we can expand a little bit more. But the question is, funders often have a perception that the bigger the numbers, the better the impact, and that relatively means that smaller scale or less impact means less effective. And what are some effective ways to present the data with all of its nuances?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's where we recommend that cost per success metric, because first off, just sharing the number of people you serve, because that's often where people are sensational, right? Like, we serve 10,000 kids. Well, that doesn't mean anything in terms of quality. I've unfortunately evaluated programs that made kids worse. And of course, if you find that you're doing that, you will do the things you can to put yourself on the right path. But when you talk to a funder about, and we've seen nonprofits change the landscape of their communities when they started telling a funder, hey, we're 75% successful at getting children to education proficiency, for example, and our cost per success is $2,500 per kid, right? It costs us $2,500 to get one kid to English proficient. I'm just making that story up. But now the funder, when they're being pitched by another nonprofit, they're going to say, well, what's your cost per success?
Right.
What's your success rate? And then that nonprofit's left going, I don't know, I served 1,000
like,
kids.
oh, we don't measure that.
Yeah. So
We're
if you lead with that story, if you lead with those numbers, if you're proactive about it, now you're changing the criteria of which that funder may start evaluating other organizations.
Okay, yeah, I love that. And like I said before, we're going to send those slides out. So I know that was kind of overviewed on one of your slides. So yeah, I hope that some people will put that into action. And you know what? I lied. I think we have time for one more question. So I know, Chris, you already relaxed, but guess what? I'm going to hit you with another one.
I'm never relaxed.
This question's from Ashley. And the question is, how can an organization be sure that they're collecting the most effective type of stories?
Well, that's a really good question. Yeah, that is a tough one. But really it's like, I recommend just sticking to the system. I know this sounds like kind of obvious, but like stick to the system that we kind of pitched a little bit earlier. I know it sounds super easy and like a little dumbed down, but like it is not. Like, it is really an effective tool. Start with the outputs, then what are the inputs, and what are the call to actions, and like have that be your foundational piece to make sure that you're collecting this qualitative data, and then go from there. But like, keep it simple. You're very busy, so like use simple frameworks for everything, and then you'll see the results.
I think that's great advice. Okay, well, those were a lot of the great questions you all submitted. And again, thank you so much for doing that. But now I'd like to get back over to Sheri. She's going to share a little bit more specifically about what SureImpact can do for your nonprofit. So Sheri, take it away.
Thank you, Carly. Let me quickly share my screen here. And I'm just going to do a really quick overview, because we talked a lot about the importance of a logic model. And so what SureImpact is, it's a online cloud-based tool that helps nonprofits capture what they do through their normal workflow. So to prioritize data collection, but able to then think like a program logic model. So when our SureImpact users log in, they have at their fingertips how many clients they served, what they did with those clients, how many hours of service, so your outputs. But then they also get to see how they're, at a quick snapshot, how are they moving the needle on the different outcomes that they want to collect. So they get to see, for example, if academic positive behavior change was one of your goals, you quickly could see the beginning, we had 69% of our clients had academic positive behavior change. Currently, 100% of our students have, and 100% have been able to maintain. So it's giving that story that you need to tell to your funders or to drive decisions. It's giving all of that information at your fingertips when you need it, when you need to write grants. We also have powerful analytics, again, that are giving you interactive views related to your work. So you have the information to tell that high level story, but then from a program accountability, everyday data-driven tracking realm, you have robust data and information that hopefully will come up here soon, but it's giving you interactive tools to look at your, again, very much based on a logic model where we know you have clients that are enrolled in your programs. that get services, and then you're trying to achieve outcome measures. So you're able to see, trends over time related to who are you serving. Everything is broken down into an equity analysis. So you can break things down by male, female, race, gender. A lot of the reporting that you need to make sure you're creating equitable outcomes. You've got all that information related to all of your outcomes here in your measures tab. And then how is the data getting inputted is the question we often get. So you'll have all this great data related to your outcomes. Is that it works the way your nonprofit works. So your staff are in here every single day, just making interactions to their clients. You're going in, recording, again, what you've done with a particular client. So if this client came in and they got a bus stop, had this session, you just record that, make any notes. You can track attendance of lots of people at once. If you have multiple people, you're saving it. And then you always can go in and see that individual's history. So if you want to just manage the outcome of one person, to tell one person's story, you can see everything you've done with them, as well as how they're moving the needle on key outcome measures. So you've got the individual story, but all of that information you're putting into SureImpact is rolling up and filling your dashboards and your analytics tabs. And so it's very intuitive to use for your line staff, but then it gives the development directors, the executive directors, the fundraisers, what they need to go tell a story. And so I know we shared a lot today. I believe Laurel in the chat was going to put in some information related to our ultimate guide of impact measurement. So it kind of outlines how to leverage technology to have impact measurement as part of your organization's culture and have that data at your fingertips.
We need an ultimate guide. That is pretty cool. I'll think of something to be the ultimate guide for. A qualitative impact measurement. That's what it'll be.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let me throw up my screen just real quick so you guys can see it. A little bit about Memory Fox. So it's a DIY software that helps you collect stories from your community, keep them all organized in a story bank that tracks consent and who's in it, when they sent it, etc. And then design all that content in amazing ways, either using our video editor that we built, our story presentation tools, or our amazing integration with Canva. Hopefully everyone here uses Canva. It's free. It's amazing. So if you don't have it, I would recommend going to check it out. It's a great way to show your impact. You can create a ton of content on it. And look, we know that you're very busy, so we actually have the ability to just run the account for you. If you want to just offload your entire storytelling and qualitative storytelling tasks onto us. We can't go to your events, unfortunately, but everything other than that, we do that as well. So yeah, really, really excited to connect with you all.
Well, thank you both, Sheri and Chris, for joining us today. You both left us with so much information. I'm so excited to send it out to everybody. So I'll send out the recording and both slide decks so people can take a look and learn more later, maybe compare it to the notes we took, and as well as those resources that were shared in the chat. So yeah, thank you so much for coming. Any last words? Any final words?
Like peanut butter and jelly, qualitative and quantitative.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I love that.
What did you do? How well did you do it? And how people are better off? Very simple framework for measuring impact.
That's it. That's the tip.
That's the move.
Yep.
Okay, thank you all for coming.
Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it.
Bye.